everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Show. We have a special guest all the way from San Diego, California, a finalist, a comedian who was a finalist at the 2016 Clean Comedy Challenge at the Ice House in Pasadena, California. Her biggest audience was 1,200 people in the grand ballroom of the Pachanga Casino. There's nothing, this is her quote, there is nothing like hearing 1,200 voices laughing together, even if half of them don't speak English. You got to love it. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the privilege of enjoying for the next 60 minutes comedian from San Diego, California, Karen Robertson. Hello, Karen. How are you?
Hi, Maurice. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be part of your show. You are such an inspiration to other comedians who are being creative in a new way. I love that.
We've been forced into a box, Karen, to be creative and do some things that are stretching us beyond the norm. And I'll say this, Karen, we've been doing comedy for so long that I think this respite or this time away from the stage is really not going to harm us. I mean, I think after you've done comedy, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but I think after you've done stand-up long enough, it almost becomes like riding a bike. You really never forget how to ride the bike. And so, okay, fine, we're doing some other things. So whenever we get back to doing comedy, we've just added something to our toolbox. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I made a New Year's goal, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago, to never leave a place until you've made everyone there laugh or smile or, have a joyful moment. And yesterday I went to the post office and I had a bunch of letters that were already ready to post, but I had one that I needed to ask a question about. And I stepped in the door and there was a line a mile long. It went around 2 corners. And so I said, oh, this must be the passport line. And everyone on the line went, no, lady, back here in the back, and I thought, hey, I got an audience. I said, well, hello, folks. All righty, then I'll just mail my mail and get on my way. And they were all laughing. And I went out the door. And I said, that was a joyful moment for me, just to hear people laugh, even if they have masks on. That's okay. I don't care.
Well, I mean, that's the mind of a comedian, though, Karen. You have the classic mind of a comic. Okay, what's the funny here? And if I can get people laughing, it's worth it. Even if you're the butt of the joke, even if it doesn't make you look so good, you know what I mean? The self-deprecating way of a comic is sometimes has a way of bringing tremendous joy to people.
Yeah,
because if you can, you know what I mean? If you can take it as a comic from time to time by being the butt of your own joke or the butt of a joke, and people like it and they think it's funny, they'll laugh with you. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. I mean, I'm with my wife. Half of my jokes come from my wife, where she's either making fun of me or she's making fun of something or somebody, and I write it down. I write this stuff. This stuff's gold, right?
Yes. So that's the best kind of joke. If it makes you laugh at the time, I say, hey, make a note of it because it's going to be funny later.
It's going to be funny later.
Yeah, my husband doesn't think I'm funny at all.
Oh, no.
I can't make him laugh. As a matter of fact, when I started my very first comic class, there was a question, when will you quit comedy? And I said, I'll quit when I can make my husband laugh.
Okay. Oh, my gosh. Well, you know what? I actually like that, Karen, because that is motivation to be a better comic. I mean, that is driving you. You know what? Actually, I got to say the honest truth, Karen. My wife was like that up until about 3 years ago, right? She just didn't think a lot of my jokes were working. And I just kept working harder and kept working harder. And then excuse me, I did a show. And at the end of the show, my wife came up to me and she said, you were the funniest comic here tonight. And I said, I
That's
did it.
cool.
I did it.
Yeah.
I finally got there, right? But I mean, it's so whatever you can use as motivation to be funny, use it.
Yeah.
Work
Now
harder.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Karen.
After a show, my husband would usually say, "You were the only one that I could understand every word you said." And that was a pretty good compliment right there, because he's hearing impaired. So what the heck? At home he can dial me out.
Oh yeah. Hey, Kevin. Hello, man. Thanks a lot, and definitely, God bless you as well, Kevin. And we're blessed to have Karen Robertson on the show today from San Diego, California. Karen, we met each other in 2016 at a clean comedy conference in San Diego, and that was I'll never forget that experience, because I met Jimmy Brogan there, Eddie Brill, who's the writer, or at the time he was the writer for David Letterman, and of course there was Brandon Young and Maria Herman, Charlene May. I mean, just a bunch of wonderfully talented people at that conference. Have you, Brian, April?
Mhm.
Have you been able to keep in contact with a lot of the folks from there?
I have. The Christian Comedy Association was the best thing that ever happened to me as
Yeah,
far as comedy was concerned.
yeah,
And there are hundreds of them. And I think I went to about 10 of the conferences and tried to make as many connections and friends as I could. And yes, I try to stay in touch with them. And even if I never got on stage again, those are the dearest friends I think that I made through comedy, because because they're Christians for one thing, they're clean, and I love to see them uh, going forward and progressing and being successful. I really worried about this pandemic for the sake of comics, and I have to say that I didn't have to make a living at it, so it wasn't ever a feeling of desperation. It wasn't ever a feeling of, "I gotta do this or else." It was more like a challenge that I loved.
yes. And I tell you, like you said before, we've been forced to stretch ourselves and find some other ways to be creative, which is only going to make us better comedians whenever we get back. And I've been doing a lot of Zoom. I haven't been doing a lot of Zoom. I've done some Zoom,
Yeah.
and I think in 2021 though, Karen, I'm going to do a lot more Zoom because now I'm at that point where it's like, okay, it's been a while. Don't know when we're going to be back out there. I don't want to get stale with my writing process of
Right.
putting routines together. So I'm going to start getting back into more Zoom shows. There's so many comedy shows all around the world. Like you can be in a Zoom show in Italy. You could do it in Montreal. You can meet comics all over the world now, and just forge new relationships in the industry. And
Exactly.
I think that's going to be my new goal for 2021. I think I've done a few Zoom shows, but I haven't done and nearly as enough as I think I should have, because I thought we'd be back by now, quite frankly and
Yeah.
honestly, Karen,
Everybody
at some
did.
point.
Yeah.
And that's just not only has that not happened, I don't think it's going to happen, anytime soon. I mean, the best case scenario I can see is maybe by the end of 2021, we may be back. Do you have any predictions yourself?
Well, I look back at the pandemic of 1918, and if you look in the history book, it actually shows it as the pandemic of 1917, 18, and 19.
Yeah.
But with our scientists working on vaccines and so forth, I don't know. I think there's hope that we could get over it faster. I know it's quite different. In 1918, if you went out of the house without a mask on, you were charged $25. Now, $25 at that time was a lot of money. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I just wrote a book on the pandemic, so.
Well, here's the deal, Karen, and this is just my personal take on the whole thing. But I was talking with Jordan Elsass earlier today, a fine young actor that's in Vindication, a crime series you can see on PureFlix. He's also on Little Fires Everywhere with Reese Witherspoon on Hulu. He's about to be on Superman and Lois on the CW. He's in Vancouver, Canada, shooting Superman and Lois, but he's on the third day of his quarantine because he came into the country and immediately they put him on 14 days.
Right.
And when I look around the world, the United States is lacking in the ability to kind of like make firm rules and regulations as to how it's all about how you feel. Well, you don't have to, you should, but you don't have to, that type of deal. And it breeds to me a lot of confusion. Yeah. And there's no reason for the number one country in the world to be one of the worst in dealing with the medical issue of any kind. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So it's kind of and we're in a real pickle. I mean, right now we're hoping that we're gonna, with the advent now of this new vaccine, we're hoping that we'll be able to get back to normal at some point in 2021. But I don't know what to think about it. But I just think other countries are handling this a lot better than we are.
Can I take you back for a second? You're talking about doing Zoom shows.
Yeah.
When you do a Zoom show, do you leave your audience open so you can hear their laughter? How do you do that?
Oh yeah. You definitely want to leave their mics open. You want their mics open,
okay,
and you want to see their faces.
I don't know how widespread it is, but I know I've read about a couple of guys that have done comedy acts at drive-in theaters. And I did. Can you imagine standing up on that big stage and throwing out your punchline and hearing absolutely nothing, and people are laughing inside of their cars? I think that would really be tough.
Well, actually, I have a friend of mine that's done some drive-in shows. The way that works is they start honking their horns.
Oh, okay.
And so he said the first time that happened, he didn't know if he was being laughed with or if he was being heckled.
Heckled, yeah.
So, but
you asked me the other day about being heckled, and I said that I had never been heckled, but but then after seeing Victoria, I was thinking, I did a couple of assisted living places.
Okay.
And they don't mean to heckle you. They just have no idea what you're saying because most of them are deaf. So they just talk among themselves the whole time, which is pretty funny. And you asked the question, how do you handle that? And I handled it the same way as I did when I was a teacher. I just took my mic and just walked right over to the people who were talking and just continued my act right over the top of their heads. Well, then, the audience starts laughing at that. So you kind of win the audience without saying anything to them. But the worst situation I thought of after answering that question was I had 7 cousins with me, and they'd never seen me perform. And we happened to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, and there was a comedy club there that you could go and do stand-up on an open mic. So we went real early, and I signed up third because I wanted to get up early and get my family out of there.
Yeah.
Well, the guy that was the MC could see that I was the only one that brought an audience. The rest of them were all comics. You know how that goes.
Exactly. I know how that works. Yes.
Yeah. And so he didn't really want to put me up first. Well, it ended up I was 22nd on the stage.
Whoa.
Yes. And since he made it very clear to the audience that I was eager about getting my turn. So they started heckling me from the stage before I had ever gotten my time on stage. That was interesting.
That's
And
very weird. Yes.
it was very weird because they didn't want me to leave because I'd take my audience with me. And there was one guy out of I think there were 24 altogether. There was one guy that worked clean and he had the best act. And so when I left, all these young men were waiting outside for me asking, where did you go to school? Where did you learn that stuff?
Mhm.
And I called that one guy over and I said, "You are going to go places because you work clean, you got great material, you'll be able to work in, for commercials and do all kinds of stuff. You're going to make a lot of money." And then I just walked off because
Well,
I was, it's sad sometimes the
well,
way open mics are run.
Well, you did I'm glad you did that because I do the same thing. I mean, I go to a lot of open mics in DC that are not clean, and I'm
Right.
usually the only clean guy there. But I
Yeah,
use it as an opportunity to, however God chooses to use me to witness,
exactly.
and because that's one of the things I tell a lot of young comics. I said, listen, you know what? You're funny, but you don't have to use a lot of that language you're using, because if you really want to make it, you should develop clean material. If you want to be on Conan O'Brien, or if you want to
Right.
be on as Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, those comics, the comics that they invite to their show, they may not be clean on a regular basis, but they're clean on that show.
Yeah,
So you
that's
have to
true.
have the ability to be clean. If you don't want to do that, that's fine, but just learn how to do it. And as you accurately stated, it's going to take you farther.
Oh, yeah. Then the doors are open every place. You can work in churches, you can, and I think to me it's tough if people, we had a group of comics that used to meet at my house all the time. And we talked about what it's like if you're clean in one place and then you do dirty material in another, people tend to not like that very much.
That's
You
true.
know, you
That's very
know,
true.
you lose your credibility.
You do. You do.
So,
I couldn't agree with you more on that.
yeah.
And there are a lot of comics, believe it or not, that they enter some churches. I did a show where I actually had a comic. I invited him to be a part of the show. He wasn't a clean comic. He was a foul mouthed comedian
Mhm,
that I
mhm.
knew, but I was giving him an opportunity to be clean. So I invited him onto the show, and he agreed. Now the booker found out that he was not a clean guy. He said, Maurice, we don't want him. So
Oh,
he
yeah,
lost an opportunity to make some money. Is what I'm
yeah,
saying. Long story
yeah,
short.
sure,
So
sure, that's so true.
people
You've said
re-
several times I'm from San Diego, and I have to, in case any of my local friends are watching this, I wanna make sure that you know that I am not from San Diego. I am not a city girl. I am a country girl through and through. I mean, when I came to this town of Marietta, there were 5 teachers, 500 people, 5 teachers, and we taught all 9 grades from kindergarten to 8th. And it's the littlest town I ever lived in, but I grew up in a town that only had 1,500. But when you ask how long had I been in comedy, I actually took the stage as a comedian for the first time, I think, when I was 65. But I started teaching when I was 21, and I always felt like I had a captive audience. and and you could be, I love to have fun with kids, and I always felt like if they were having fun and I was having fun, we'd get something done. Well, it's kind of the same way on stage. If you're suffering up there, your audience suffers too. But if you're having fun on the stage, I think your audience has fun with you.
Well, Polly Pelham, who seems to be someone that had the blessing of you being her grade school teacher.
That's
I,
cool.
I, I got to ask you this: what was it like for you transitioning, Karen, from the schoolroom to the stage as a comic?
I think I had a huge advantage. I
Yeah.
think I had a huge advantage because I was old, and I felt like most audiences were more respectful because they saw an old woman up there and they thought, well, we'll see what she has up her sleeve. But I think that helped. And I definitely think it helped to know how to work an audience
Yeah.
because after working with kids and teachers all my life, uh, I could see where that was also an advantage. I was at a I was performing in a place that has it's an eating establishment, but it also has a bar and it's also open to families.
Okay.
So a lot of people, it was full, packed, and there were a bunch of men drinking at the bar, and there were a bunch of Marines out in the center celebrating a birthday, and then families over on the side eating dinner. I was 12th on stage, and I could see that my friends were getting nowhere with the audience because
Yeah.
they were all busy doing something else. And and I thought I should just go home. And then I thought, no, 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 no. This is a test. And so I
Yeah.
turned over to the bar and I got the attention of the somebody at the bar and I said, "You guys over at the bar, I want to thank you for sitting here through 12 comedians just for me." And they all turned around and laughed and they started watching me. And then I turned to the Marines and I said, "You guys are having such a great party. I wish I was out there instead of up here." And I talked to them and brought them in and then to the families and thanked everybody profusely for being there, for sitting through the show. And I had them. I had them
Wow.
for
Nice.
the rest of my act. And um, I felt like it was a strategy I would have used with kids or teachers to get their attention. I, and besides that, being a teacher all those years, you can't stand it if you don't have control of the room.
Well,
You just
no, no,
can't
no, no.
stand it.
It drives you nuts. But that that was a really great strategy because when you get situations every now and then, or you'll
Yeah.
get into a room where it's like you have a lot of audience members that are indifferent to the
Mhm.
performers, and trying to wrest control of that room is definitely a huge challenge. A lot of comics they think by being rude somehow that's going to endear the audience to them, and of course that's not going to work. Being rude and is not the way to do it. But then you just start wondering, oh, what do you do to overcome that? But that's a great strategy that you used. I mean, you basically what you did was you attacked the quote unquote so-called elephant in the room, as it
Yeah,
were. It's like, okay, a lot of comics, they don't know what to do and they just try to
right.
ignore it and continue their act. But you decided that you were going to just attack it, invade their space, but you have to do it with class or you're going to lose it.
Kindness.
And
Yeah,
exactly,
kindness.
exactly. And that
Yeah.
sounds like that's a great way to go about it. That's pretty awesome. As we're talking about it, what is your worst bombing experience on stage, Karen?
Oh gosh, I always felt pretty successful, but one Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock,
Yeah.
I was asked to perform for a bunch of excuse me, high school kids who they were there as an alternative to being in jail. And
Okay.
so now I knew I could control the room because there was law enforcement with them. so,
Yeah.
there wasn't any question about that. But they did not want to be there. They were unhappy about their whole situation, and my material didn't fit them, and they weren't going to give me the time of day.
Yeah.
So finally, there was another comedian there, and he had done it for years, like 30 years.
Yeah.
He tried everything. He pulled out some magic tricks, and he couldn't do anything with them. And then he started in on some dirty jokes and kind of got the wave from the law enforcement man. So I went back on the stage and I started talking to those kids about when I was in high school. and how I thought I was really a cool gal because I started smoking when I was 15 and I started drinking when I was 16. And uh, then I talked to him about how I became a Christian, and I realized that um, I those things just weren't serving me. That Christ was the way, and it was amazing how quiet they got, and they really did give me their attention because I could tell them I shared myself. Let's put it that way. I just shared myself and said that when I came to Christ, my whole life changed.
Okay. Well, at least you were able to make your point. I mean, when you're doing a show like that and you don't have the attention of the audience, or you may say something that loses the audience, it can be a really bad deal for a comic. I had to do a high school once myself. I think that demographic is probably the toughest demographic to get laughs from. So I had an opportunity to do a high school, and this girl, she found me on my website, and I thought she was going to hire me. She's, oh, I can't afford to hire you. We're having a cancer benefit for some families in the neighborhood, and so forth and so on. And I said, you know what, I'll do it. And I went there and I wrote a set specifically for high school mindsets. I tried my best to just attack topics that I would approach from an adult's perspective that was more on a level of appeasement than, kind of, this isn't cool or whatever. I don't know. They were safe topics. Long story short, I did really, really well. I was able to find out what it was that made them tick. And I just talked about those things, video games, comic books, whatever the stuff is that they're into. I fashioned my whole set after that. So that I was really hesitant because I'd never performed. And it was a gymnasium full of high school kids. And I was able to come through that one pretty good. I was like, oh, man, okay. But at the end of the day, when you're doing comedy, Karen, you try to, I don't know if you operate this way or not, but you try to look at your demographic and you try to go, comedy's comedy, but you don't want to go off the page where that demographic just simply cannot relate to your subject matter.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my best audience is someone that's 45 and over and not dead yet.
Yes. Yes. When
Karen
speaks,
even then, sometimes those audiences are pretty tough because I've done assisted living where you end up with the guy in the front row's got his head on his chest and you're not sure if he is dead or alive. And, those are tough. You work hard. Really hard.
Yes, you do. Michelle Van Duzen has a question for you. She wants to know, how many books have you written, and are any of them about comedy?
Oh, Michelle, you are a sweetheart. Yeah, well, that's why this year was such a good year for me because I finished 4 books. They're all in various stages of being finished, but my goal is to get them up and on Amazon this year. And Michelle, I'm going to tell on her. She wants to be the person who is mentioned most in the acknowledgments of books by people who know her. So she's just dying for me to get those 4 books out so I can mention her in the acknowledgments. But the only one that's had anything to do, well, I try to put humor in everything I write.
Yeah.
But an agent asked me to write a book about a memoir, a humorous memoir about the pandemic. Hello. I mean, that wasn't an easy thing to do, but I went to work on it and I'm finished with it, and I'm looking forward to getting it published while the pandemic is still going on. I don't know if that's possible or not.
Yes. last week, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Karen, I had a guest on the show by the name of Berlinda Sullen, and she's in a film called Love Goes Public. As we talk about, school, you being a former school teacher, she's a principal of a high school at Booker T. Washington in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And what she did was she transformed the entire school. I mean, it was about as much chaos and dysfunction as you could imagine at a high school that was attended by and large by impoverished students. And she turned that thing around. And what she's asking for all of those that are listening, real quick, if I just may say this, she's asking those that may want to donate help for some of the children there in the way of books and so forth. And you can do that as a tax write-off. But because 98% of the school is a part of the reduced lunch program, and they just need donations of help of any kind. If anyone is interested, you can contact Berlinda at 334-421-0148, 334-421-0148. And you can contact Berlinda Sullen if you have any interest in helping them out in that school system in Tuscaloosa. And she's also in a film called Love Goes Public. It's a documentary done by Kevin Flanagan. And as we talk about that, Karen, at you being a former school teacher, I know I did it for 6 years. And I worked with emotionally disturbed teens.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, I found that a lot of those kids were kind of like, they were just disregarded. I don't think the school system really paid a whole lot of attention to them, other than the fact that we just need to, push these guys through. Let's get them a diploma and on their way. But that it was a pretty poor program. Do you have any recollection when you were in the school system of how those type of students were dealt with?
Well, funny you should ask, Maurice. I did. One of the books that I wrote is about my relationship with my grandson who had brain cancer when he was 4 years old.
Okay.
And so he's a special needs kid. Actually, he was treated at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And so every penny I've ever made on writing or comedy, walking tours, it all goes to Rady Children's Hospital because those kids are special. But something that I discovered in writing this book is the change in my relationship to special needs kids. When we were in school, they were off in a different building. We didn't even see them. It was like we all were convinced they had cooties or something. And then when I started teaching, I write this story in the book about a girl that was put in my class who was definitely special needs. And I was so impatient with her that I made sure that they got her out of my class and out of the school. And then in 1978, when I became a Christian, my whole life changed. When I fell in love with Jesus, I just sort of fell in love with everybody. And so kids like that became very important to me. And I tell in the book about the transition that I made and how God prepared me for my grandson and how I've been able to use everything I've ever learned in college, in clown school, in comedy classes, in my master's in counseling. Everything I've ever known has been an asset to my grandson that I love and spend a lot of time with. I don't know if that answers your question, but Rady Children's Hospital is responsible. And you know what I have to say, Victoria, that was on yesterday, she was talking about the misleading, or she was concerned about the title of the film that she was in,
Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, and I had to laugh because when I signed up to be in TED 2, I thought it was a children's film. I had no idea it was a rated R film,
Yeah.
but God had sent me on a mission to meet Mark Wahlberg. And of course, I put that story in the book also about how in the world does, oh gosh, at the time I must have been 74 or so, end up in a Mark Wahlberg scene in a movie because of her special needs grandson.
Wow.
So yeah, it's going to be a cool book. My grandson's name is Les, and the name of the book is More for Less.
Okay. Good stuff. Good
Yeah.
stuff. You know, we were. Well, I appreciate you entertaining that particular question. I knew that you were a school teacher, and I mean, invariably, on some level, whether you deal directly with special needs kids or not, you're going to have some knowledge of it. I know when I was doing it in the early '90s, they tried to put the kids in the mainstream. So they didn't have them.
Yeah.
They didn't have them out in a trailer or
Right.
away from everybody. They tried to mix them into one or two classes, and so forth. But even at that, you know, I just thought that the curriculum was so poor, as I'm like, these kids are are never going to learn anything if you're giving them the Lion King to study and you taking trips to McDonald's every other day. I mean, what are they really learning? But anyway, I thought it was kind of odd. I did it for 6 years. I tried to help out as much as possible. Took them to church with me and my wife sometimes, which the school system was not a fan of.
No, I'm sure they weren't.
No, they were not a fan of that. But I did have the
Good for you.
The permission of their parents and or / the guardians to take about. But I appreciate you entertaining that subject. Let me change back over to comedy. You and I mean, of course, you're older than myself, but we still come from an era at our core, and you certainly more so than I, but still, when I think about people like Rodney Dangerfield and Don Rickles, and then I throw Richard Pryor in more along my lines, and John Belushi, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Saturday Night Live of the 70s with Gilda Radner and so forth. That kind of comedy we don't really see anymore. I mean, today's comedy is a far cry different. How would you describe this era of comedy with comedy back in the day, Karen?
That's an interesting question. Well, for one thing, all of those, well, not all that you named, but all the ones that I grew up with, you know, the George Burns and Bob Hope and Lucille Ball. I mean, and Red Skelton, Carol Burnett, they were all clean. It was all clean.
They were.
Now that didn't mean they didn't use innuendos from time to time, for
right?
Sure,
right.
But you never heard a foul word. I think wasn't it George Carlin that broke the ceiling on that dirty word thing, because he did one of the very first shows where he talked about dirty words.
Yes, he did. Yes,
and that kind of opened the door for that. It seemed like, but. And I love physical comedy. I loved Lucille Ball. You know, my husband and I did a thing for our church. Of course, we almost got excommunicated, but but I lip synced Santa Baby, and my husband was Santa, but nobody knew who he was because he had the whole beard and everything on.
Yeah.
And I pranced around that stage with my bola, you know, and I felt like I was Lucille Ball cut loose. You know, I just thought that was the most fun I ever had in my life.
Yes.
And no, the pastor wasn't real happy about it, but you know, sometimes you just can't help yourself.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about what you just described is that we've moved from, and of course, George Carlin did open the door more or less to extreme profanity on stage for comics. I guess Lenny Bruce might be the one that actually broke the barrier for it. But it kind of, you know, opened the door for your Richard Pryors and your Eddie Murphys and so forth and so on. I go on and on and on. But comedy today is so politically correct. Like, you know, what you did obviously was kind of, you know, pushing the envelope. But now you can be a clean comedian and you can offend a lot of different social groups.
I
And
think that's scary.
yeah,
To me, that's scary. That takes away your chance to be creative.
yes,
Uh, it's too hard.
it's become quite difficult. And as we talk about this era, as a female comedian, have you, because and that's kind of a new thing, more or less. I don't know if I would say a total new thing, but do you think it's more difficult for female comedians to get booked than their male counterparts?
See, I don't think it. I hear that a lot, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it depends on marketing. I really
Okay.
do. I think people who get out there and do it and do the marketing can be just as successful as the men can. Uh,
Yeah.
but you got to do the work. You got to do the work.
You have
I
to do the
hated
work.
marketing. I just hated marketing because the self promotion is maybe tougher for women. I don't know, but I think there are some great female comedians, and female comedians are more restricted, I think, than males are. They don't dare launch into their uh, what am I trying to say, private parts or anything like that. They have to stay really high up on the
Well,
scale, I think.
I would say, in days gone by, yes. In 2020, I don't know that that's necessarily the
Yeah.
case with some of these comedians now. That's why it's a different era. You have female comedians now that talk about everything that
Oh,
you could
yeah.
possibly imagine.
I totally agree, but they're not the ones that are working clean, though.
Well, no. They're
Yeah.
definitely they're definitely not working clean. But I think the era has changed a lot in that regard. But I just wanted to ask you, because I've always found that I personally think that females have a quicker wit and sense of humor than men do. They just seem to they're just always a tick or two ahead of us. And when you're talking about comedy, I think it makes it even funnier. But a lot of female comedians through the years, I think, have kind of been discarded and disrespected a little bit. And you think about the Carol Burnett's of the world and the Lucille Balls of the world, who kind of really got it going for female comics.
Yeah.
And then it, launched into the 70s. Like I did mention Gilda Radner and some other female comics, but I've always thought that women were a little bit disrespected for some stupid reason when it comes getting, booked. It's like I've never quite understood that, and I didn't know if you had a particular take on that or not, but I do appreciate you answering that question.
I've always felt like if you're good, you're good.
Yeah.
And if you're good, you're going to be asked to perform and speak.
Yeah.
That even down to take Jeannie Robertson. Now she's not I don't call her a stand-up comic, but she's hilarious, and she's a storyteller.
Okay.
And she's like me. She's a retired teacher, and as a matter of fact, I've been asked to autograph her DVDs before, which I think is hilarious. I was going to perform at a breakfast, and the guy who got me to come said, I can't believe it. He said, usually we only have 50 people here, and today we have 100 people. And I thought, hey, I'm making a name for myself. I think I'm getting popular. And about 5 minutes before I was to go on stage, a gentleman came over with Jeannie Robertson's DVD and asked me to autograph it. And, the Lord knows how to humble you, because I suddenly realized the reason there were 100 people there was probably because they thought somebody besides me was going to be performing. So that was humbling, and it was good for me.
So Karen, Michelle Van Duzen asks, what is your favorite bit that you do?
Oh, Michelle. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. She is just putting me on I don't know. I open up by doing a teaching on laughter. And of course, I tell everybody that I still see myself. My eyes are going bad because I still see myself as a smoking hot 35-year-old, and that usually gets the audience going. But then I like to talk about humor and explain to people that I used to belong to the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor, and they have scientifically proven that laughter makes you happier, healthier, live longer, be more creative, and learn faster. And in order to get that benefit, all you have to do is laugh. And the kicker is, it doesn't make any difference whether the laughter is real or fake.
Whoa.
Did you know that?
I did
So
not know.
if you go fake laughing around your house, you're still going to get all those benefits.
Wow. Interesting.
And so then I tell the audience, I say, well, if I want you to get the benefits, so I want you to get lots of laughs. And if at any point I feel like you're falling down on the job,
Yeah.
I'll just slap my leg, and then that'll remind you to kick it up a notch, So every now and then, if the joke would die a little bit, I'd slap my leg and the whole audience would burst into laughter. And oh, she wants me to tell about skydiving. Skydiving. Oh, she's crazy. I took a pole dancing class. That's probably what she was thinking about, But Maurice, don't try to visualize that. I mean, I was the only one who had a pole with a drop-down oxygen mask. So there you go. Skydiving.
Hey, Karen.
Michelle is crazy.
Karen,
I never did skydive.
I hear you. Karen, what's interesting, you mentioned that, what you said about laughing and fake laughing, because outside of Jesus Christ being my Lord and Savior, and I try to, roll with the Lord all day long from, beginning to end. But one of the other things that I like to do, and particularly as a comic, to keep the creative juices going, I always try to watch stuff that I think's really funny every day if I can remember to do it,
Yep.
And I mean belly laughs. I mean there's certain things that I can just access on YouTube, whether it be a film, whether it be a TV show, whether it be a stand-up comedy. There's certain things that just really crack me up, and I try to watch it and get those belly laughs in every day. And the thing that I've found interesting is, not only does it kind of open my mind up as I prepare to write, so, okay, now I'm there. I'm ready to start writing, Not only does it do that for me, but there's a mental therapeutic effect that's invaluable. Because in my opinion, I think when you're laughing, you're in the clearest state of mind that you could possibly be in when you're laughing. You just see you're
pushing everything else away. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you just see the field of life in such a more plausible way, and you can see what an idiot you are yourself. It's like, why do I do certain things, or how could I have ever looked upon a subject in that way, or whatever. The self-deprecating part of yourself can kick in, and there are so many benefits to laughter. I just had to piggyback on what you said about the fake laughing. It's like it's such a powerful spirit that can transform the way you look at life and the way that you feel. Yeah,
for sure. I had shingles a few years ago.
Okay.
And I did go to the doctor. I did get meds, but I came home and sat in the recliner and watched 48 episodes of Golden Girls and just laughed myself well. I mean, I think I got over shingles in record time.
Wow.
Because that's all I did. I said, okay, I'm just going to laugh myself well. And I did.
Karen,
so what's your favorite show to watch to laugh?
Oh my gosh, I love Seinfeld.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you, my number one show of all time is Sanford and Son.
Okay, yeah.
That is the funniest show I've ever seen on TV. But I love Seinfeld too. Seinfeld it does it for me big time. And there are just certain stand-up comics that do it for me as well. I mean, I actually I love Jerry Seinfeld as a stand-up comedian as well. Martin Short. I don't know if you've ever seen Martin Short before, but he's really funny. He's from SCTV. He does this thing called Jiminy Glick. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but he interviews people in this character called Jiminy Glick, and it is so funny. Martin Short is one of the funniest people I've ever seen as well. But yeah, those are a few things that I like to kind of watch on a daily basis if I can remember to do it. But you know what? Just to go back to what you said about the shingles.
Yeah.
You know, in God's word, in Proverbs, God says laughter is like a medicine.
Medicine is. It is.
It's like a medicine. So, you know, and the fact that you said that it pretty much healed you of shingles, pretty amazing, Karen. Pretty amazing.
And I'm not kidding you. That organization that I belong to has scientifically proven that there's truth in that. It's awesome.
It's awesome. Let me ask you something, Karen, as we're winding the show. Hey, Michelle, yeah, Jiminy's is crazy funny for sure.
Oh, could I say one thing? Or let me say one thing about Jerry Seinfeld. I think Jerry Seinfeld kind of brought us to a new type of comedy, because I think he was kind of the first who took that observational comedy, and so many people have tried to copy him.
Yeah,
but he was clean. He kind of changed directions for comedy when he came on the scene.
Well, you know what Jerry Seinfeld actually, you know, I saw an interview that he did, and he said that someone asked him if he's always clean, and he says, no, I cuss like everybody else, but I don't think that the stage is a place where you do that. And now let me just say this. For someone who's not a part of the body of Christ, as it were, because Jerry is an unorthodox, a Jewish person. But that being said, he has a natural understanding of the way you go about doing things. It is no small wonder that Jerry Seinfeld is the most lucrative comic by far in the world, and he's clean.
Yeah.
So it goes a long way. It goes an absolute long way. I wanna ask you this, Karen. And Michelle Van Dusen definitely agrees. He's got a great comedic viewpoint. Yeah, but let me ask you: what is the biggest thing that you have learned about comedy that's made you a better comedian?
The biggest thing I have learned about it: practice, practice, practice.
Okay.
and learn. You know, anyone who thinks that they can go into comedy in isolation is sadly mistaken, because you need to listen to other comics, you need to study, you need to take classes. I mean, I've got a whole library of books and DVDs and stuff and I'm still not the funniest comic. I would never even come close. But I just know that I knew that when I went on stage, I knew what I was going to do, and I was going to do the best I could at it. But it takes a lot of work.
Well,
a lot of work. It was the hardest challenge I ever gave myself.
I like what you just said. Study, work. Because there's a big difference between being the funniest guy in the break room at work. There's a big difference between being the funniest person on your job or at the dinner party. There's a big difference between being naturally funny and a skillful comic. They're two completely different things. And you can only be skillful if you study the craft, because in comedy, there's a song, there's a rhythm, there's a melody, there's a way that you do it. And yeah, you can have a lot of funny ideas. And I saw, oh, that was good. You hear funny story. You got to know how to put it in a package and deliver it. And that takes work, and it takes practice to figure out that song. It's a beat. It's a melody. It's a pace. It's and you got to study it.
Yeah.
And that's the only, it's the only way you can get good.
Right. You even hear people who have great material, but they don't know how to deliver it. And vice versa. They have a great delivery and no material. You know, it all goes together.
It all goes together, Karen. There's no doubt. So Michelle wants to know, how do we follow you or see you in a show? Are you doing any Zoom shows?
You know, lately, most of my Zoom shows are for the writers group, my relatives, all that kind of stuff. No, I do not have anything on the calendar, but they can see some of my stuff at www.sayitwithhumor.com. That's where my website is.
Okay.
And I did a show with Rhonda Corey. I think you did too. And I want to say a special thanks to Rhonda Corey, because she's a sweetheart, and I think she's kind of the leader in this format. I really think she's reached out and given a lot of comics an opportunity to show themselves, which is really neat.
She absolutely has. Rhonda Corey absolutely goes for it. She has a show called Talk is Cheap.
Yes.
That she does twice a week with multiple comedians.
Yes.
So she's putting her work in. There's no question about it. Rhonda Corey is one of the leaders on this platform, particularly as it relates to comedy. So I would 100% agree with you, Karen. But I think that, you know, this is where we're going, and you know, we're jumping on it right now. We're going to go as far as we can with it. Actually, let's see. Michelle Van Duzen also says, sayitwithhumor.com.
My website.
That's your website. We just want to make sure that we got it correct here.
Michelle is, I should say a word about Michelle too. She and I have been roommates at some conferences, and she is a dear heart. She has a heart for every comic that's out there. She's always watching. She's always encouraging and building up, and I just love her. And she, whenever there's a show, she's there. She's listening. She's learning. She's adding to it, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, Michelle is awesome. I mean, she's. I met her on a show with Rhonda Corey. Talk is Cheap. We happened to be on together. That's where I met Michelle. So I've been staying in contact with her ever since. She's hilarious. Number one, she's hilarious, and she's a very kind person as well. So thank you so much, Michelle, for hanging out with me and Karen today. This has been a lot of fun. So Karen, and you know, you really kind of answered the question, because I love to end the show with, how can fans follow you on social media or contact you for booking? And I think you kind of answered that, right, Karen?
Yeah, they can go to my website, or they can email me at Canwrite with a K, KANWRITE at verizon.net.
Awesome stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the very funny Karen Robertson on the Maurice Brown Show. Karen, hope to run into you again. We're doing all the Zoom stuff. We got to do some Zoom comedy or something together down the road. Get all the San Diego comics together. Let's do a show or something on Zoom.
Okay. I got some connections down here. I may not live in San Diego, but I know a lot of comics in this area, so that would be cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Maurice. Thank you so much for giving me a shot. I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure, Karen. My pleasure. It's been a joy having you on the show. And may the peace of Christ, Karen, be with you and your family. God bless you.
Thank you. Amen. Same to you, Maurice. Bye-bye.